Hey guys, it's the Faceless Beanie and welcome to my Zephyr guide where I'll explain her abilities, some synergies, and a couple of useful builds as well. Let's get into it. Zephyr's passive alters her airborne physics in that she has significantly reduced gravity, giving her more control mid-air with a slower descent. While airborne, Zephyr's weapons gain a 150% critical chance buff which stacks on top of existing critical chance mods. The Augment Anchored Glide gets rid of the reduced gravity on Zephyr and replaces it with a minor strength buff. Let's get into Zephyr's first, Tailwind. This ability can be held or tapped. Tapping makes Zephyr dash in the direction of the aiming reticle at a fixed speed and distance. This is the same whether you're grounded or in midair. However, holding while in midair allows Zephyr to glide, constantly draining energy while doing so. You can keep hovering until energy runs out. Glide will deactivate when you touch a horizontal surface, perform a dodge roll, jump, or perform a melee attack, aside from energy depleting of course. While airborne, looking downward and casting the ability again causes Zephyr to dive bomb, crashing into the ground with an explosion with a certain radius, inflicting impact damage to all enemies affected. They'll also be knocked down. The higher you are before dive bombing, the more damage you'll deal on impact. However, this is mostly negligible. Energy cost is affected by efficiency, as speed and energy drain is affected by ability duration, damage is affected by ability strength, and explosion radius is affected by ability range. Tailwind's Augment mod, Target Fixation, increases dive bomb damage for every enemy hit. This stacks indefinitely. The more enemies you hit, the more your damage continues to ramp up. However, there's a 2-second grace period once you hit the ground. If you don't get back in the air before this is up, your buff will reset. To overcome this, use Tailwind while grounded to prevent the reset, then get back in the air. Let's move on to the second ability, Airburst. Zephyr launches a dense slice of air towards her aiming reticle. This ability can also be held or tapped. Tapping pulls enemies toward the center of the airburst, while holding will push enemies away instead. If airburst hits an enemy directly instead of a surface, it will deal all 3 physical damage types with a 50% status chance. Although negligible, just know that each enemy hit by airburst increases airburst damage by 35%. Energy cost is affected by ability efficiency, damage is affected by ability strength, and explosion radius is affected by ability range. Moving on to Turbulence. Zephyr surrounds herself in a protective wind barrier with a fixed radius that reflects incoming enemy bullets and projectiles. This barrier will prevent all damage except melee attacks, status effects, staggers, and explosions. Energy cost is affected by ability efficiency, duration is affected by ability duration, and shield radius is affected by ability range. The Augment mod Jetstream provides additional movement speed and projectile speed to Zephyr and her allies. This extra movement speed affects Zephyr's movement while airborne as well. Buff to allies is affected by ability range, while movement speed and projectile speed are both affected by ability strength. Finally, Zephyr's fourth, Tornado. This ability can also be held or tapped. Tapping creates tornadoes that wander towards enemies within a limited radius around Zephyr. Their direction can be controlled by zooming in with your weapon. Holding will create stationary tornadoes, centered at the aiming reticle instead. A maximum of 3 tornadoes can be active at once and they have a limited uptime. Shooting or attacking a tornado will cause it to absorb all incoming damage, including elemental damage and critical damage. Elemental damage absorption will keep stacking, while critical damage is doubled. All damage is spread to enemies trapped within the tornado. Energy cost is affected by ability efficiency, spawn radius is affected by ability range, while tornado duration is affected by ability duration. You cannot increase the maximum number of active tornadoes unless you use the augment, Funnel Clouds. However, using this halves the size of each tornado and removes the ability to pick up enemies. Enemies can however still be picked up if they are ragdolled first with Airburst. Time to move into some synergies. The basic synergy is with her passive. You want to stay airborne at all times to utilize the 150% critical chance buff that'll significantly empower your weapons. Zephyr just isn't meant to be grounded. Tailwind's Dive Bomb only comes to life with target fixation, which allows you to repeatedly cast Dive Bomb to scale damage infinitely, provided you avoid wall latching or staying grounded too long. This isn't the most realistic way of using Zephyr, but it's a fun way nonetheless. Airburst is mostly a crowd control tool. Group enemies close together and slash them with your melee weapon, or alternatively blast them with your kit gun, whatever you like. Turbulence can render Zephyr invulnerable at times, as long as enemies don't get too close. Having Turbulence up means you'll be repelling virtually all damage coming in. Look out for nullifiers or napalms for their AoE damage, of course. You want Turbulence active at all times. You can use Turbulence to shield the defense objective as well. This of course requires you to stand on the objective, so ensure you're able to kill enemies before they get too close. At the time of this video, Tornado allows any weapon with a moderate critical chance and some status to basically one-hit any enemy. Set up your weapon for electricity or gas procs along with critical chance and critical damage. Get your tornadoes up and running and shoot the tornadoes with your weapon. That's it. Some great weapons that work well with this are the Fulmin, the Dread, the Catchmoon and the Kuwa Chakur, but many other weapons will work just fine. Using funnel clouds is completely unnecessary, but if you want even more tornadoes, just use Airburst to ensure all those tornadoes are picking up enemies and replicating what the ability should do. Of course, if this damage absorption ever gets changed, then tornadoes will be used to apply status procs quickly to an entire room of enemies while rendering them immobile. Now let's get into some cheap, straightforward builds. First, a tornado focus build. In its current state, Tornado doesn't need strength, so the build solely focuses on duration for turbulence and some survivability, which you'll barely need. The range mods are there to ensure you have an acceptable radius for tornadoes to expand on, should you choose to have them wander around instead of stay stationary. Couple this with a weapon with a decent crit chance and mod it for electric or gas procs. So it's pretty simple: cast Turbulence, stay in the air, cast Tornado, shoot Tornado, kill enemies. Keep Turbulence active and stay in the air by using Tailwind's hover mechanic. Then this target fixation dive bomb build focuses on range and efficiency, so you can keep recasting Tailwind and ensure as many enemies as possible are affected by dive bomb. The Axelis mod here can be Aviator for survivability, Power Drift for a little bit more strength, or Prime Sure-Footed to prevent knockback when you're recasting Turbulence. You shouldn't need this though, since you should be trying to stay in the air as much as possible. Some duration in this build is important for Turbulence. Vitality or Adaptation keep you alive while recasting Turbulence, and of course Umbral options will be useful but are unnecessary. So this build works best where there are large groups of enemies in closed spaces, like survival missions. Repeatedly casting Tailwind will ramp up your damage, and within half a minute or so you should be at a point where you're one-hitting everything. Of course, you can use this in exterminate or defense missions as well, but the ramping up will take a little longer. Remember, you can always use Tailwind while grounded as an emergency to keep your buff active, as if you're grounded for over 2 seconds, your buff resets. Finally, a Turbulence build. This one's meant to utilize Turbulence as much as possible, whether you want to use it for general gameplay, for survivability, or for defense objectives. Jetstream increases glide speed, and I've added a little bit of strength to further buff Jetstream since I use projectile based weapons, but you can opt for Rush instead for increased glide movement speed. Stay in the air and utilize Zephyr's passive, all while being virtually invulnerable. That's about it. As usual, if I missed anything out or you have some other tips to share for Zephyr, please share them in the comments down below. With that, I hope this helped you out. This is the Faceless Beanie, signing out.